A fertilizer plant in northern Germany. It's existed in one form or another for more than 100 years. Will it be around for the next 10? It recorded a loss in 2024 and has been producing at lower capacity. High energy costs complicate even the short-term outlook. Is this simply a business model that no longer works?
Das Ganze dreifach so teuer und am Markt erlöse ich nicht die dreifachen Produktpreise. Das erklärt ganz einfach, warum wir uns in der Situation befinden, in der wir uns befinden.
High costs, low demand, and growing competition are eating into bottom lines across Germany. Manufacturers have been producing less and cutting more jobs.
Germany has held on to industrial jobs like few other nations. But as times change, some businesses and perhaps some entire sectors face an existential challenge.
The new government plans to spend more, but will that be enough to keep traditional industries intact and encourage new ones? We'll look at the shift hitting German industry, whether keeping industrial jobs means holding on to specific sectors, and why wealthier economies are so eager for more manufacturing jobs.
Today, American industry was reborn.
And fear one word in particular:
deindustrialization.
Germany and the fight to hold on to industry, coming up on Business Beyond. Let's begin here, the exhibition halls in Hanover, Germany, home to one of the world's major industrial fairs. The Hannover Messe is a showcase of German manufacturing. From robots, to logistics, to whatever this thing is. Germany is still one of the world's top manufacturers, a category including production of tools, textiles, and steel. By sheer value added of manufactured goods produced in 2021, it followed the US and China, economies that are significantly larger, and was comparable to Japan. Take into account the size of its economy and manufacturing share within it, and Germany is one of the wealthiest countries to produce at such a high level. Most other wealthy nations have seen manufacturing as a share of GDP fall more rapidly in recent decades. Employment in the manufacturing branch is also still relatively strong in Germany, roughly 1 out of 5 workers. That includes not just those on the factory floor, but managers and administrators. In the US, by comparison, it's less than 1 out of 13.
But for all the latest and greatest that you see here in Hanover, the fact is, many of these companies are having a hard time with orders and with revenue.
Orders have slowed in recent years after piling up during the pandemic. Overall industrial production has meanwhile only fallen in the same time.
There are a number of factors behind this slump, but a big one is that some baseline conditions in Germany have changed.
The biggest is the soaring energy costs as a result of the war in Ukraine, a challenge especially for energy-intensive industries. Think steel, chemicals, glass. Another problem is that key markets have struggled in recent years. Chinese demand is still recovering from the pandemic and a property market crash. In Europe, economies have struggled since the beginning of the war in Ukraine.
But there's another problem. European and especially German manufacturers are facing more competition in areas that they once dominated.
China is frankly making more of what it once bought from Germany. And that's also visible here in Hanover, where the number of foreign manufacturers has increased steadily over the past decades. Chinese companies are now competing with German ones, not just for Chinese business, but also in third markets.
The accepted wisdom has been that Germany doesn't win on price alone. Think about wage costs and energy costs. Instead, it's supposed to win on superior quality. But now competitors are making that more difficult.
And now, looming over all of this, tariffs and the threat of an ongoing trade war.
In other words, the case for investing in Germany has objectively grown worse in recent years. Higher energy costs and higher wages in an increasingly competitive environment. Add to that complaints over bureaucracy and regulation, something that you often hear from businesses here. In the best case scenario, companies are simply waiting to invest as they figure out where economic trends are heading.
Others are already cutting, like the auto industry. Volkswagen aims to shed 35,000 positions by 2030. And Germany's broad network of auto suppliers is already making deep cuts. The car industry is of course facing a unique challenge, a fundamental change of drive systems, and German companies haven't been at the forefront. Other manufacturers are also cutting back, or they're moving production elsewhere. A 2024 survey by consultancy firm EY found that in a group of more than 100 mid to large-sized German manufacturers, only 13% were planning to expand in Germany. Almost half were planning new locations overseas, and almost a third were considering moving jobs from Germany to another country.
Whether because of cuts or because of outsourced production, industrial workers in Germany are losing jobs.
More than 100,000 positions disappeared between fall 2023 and the end of 2024. That's 1.5% of total manufacturing employment in Germany. That's helping nudge up the joblessness rate, despite a period of record employment in the country. And the forecasts look only slightly better in the near term. A new prognosis sees unemployment remaining near pandemic-era highs of over 6% through 2026.
The thing is, by most measures, Germany has been deindustrializing for quite some time, like most advanced economies.
In fact, just over the past 15 years, total employment in the German economy grew by 26%, and manufacturing by a mere 6%. And that's just the continuation of a longer process. 70 years ago, more than 40% of German workers were in production, which includes mining and construction. But of course, production was far more labor-intensive in the past. In socialist countries like the former East Germany, factories were essentially job programs. State-run companies didn't have to compete, so they could be inefficient. But in a competitive system, people are expensive to pay, especially as living standards rise. So industrial jobs have increasingly fallen away. For one, new technology has increased productivity around the world, meaning fewer jobs are required to achieve the same output. And that trend continues today, with increasingly automated production. Globalization brought another possibility, hiring less expensive labor elsewhere. And with wealth came the rise of the service sector. That competes with spending on goods, further hitting the share of manufacturing jobs. And so deindustrialization has become something of the expectation for advanced economies. As they become wealthier, some manufacturing gives way to more labor-intensive, service-oriented branches, and ideally to more advanced production, from cars and airplanes to robots and even AI-powered machinery.
But why do economies move at different speeds then? Why has Germany, for example, been able to hold on to more industrial jobs proportionally than, say, the US?
Germany, like all the other advanced economies, has been seeing a trend decline in manufacturing employment for decades.
This is Adam Posen. He's head of the Peterson Institute for International Economics, and he spent much of his career looking at the German and American economies.
It was slowed and temporarily reversed by the happenstance that the things Germany was good at, bulk chemicals, automobiles, large engines and turbines, trains, happened to be what China was buying a lot of in the late 90s and early 2000s. In this sense, the only abnormality of Germany was this luck and insistence on trying to stick with it.
Today, that luck and cheap energy costs seems to be fading.
We are seeing some rather abrupt shifts of production location and closing of plants. But if you look at the long run average, this is just sort of catching Germany up to the trend that's true of most advanced economies.
Today, many argue that that transition is coming with a downside, and one that's only become more evident in recent years.
April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn.
Manufacturing jobs have a strong political resonance in an era of globalization, a resonance now visible in the tariffs introduced by Donald Trump. In a way, Trump's actions conform to a popular opinion in the U.S. that manufacturing jobs are especially valuable.
We will retool existing factories, hire locally, and work with unions to create good-paying jobs, including jobs that do not require a college degree.
The myth, which is a little more true in the US, but still exaggerated, is that people who don't finish high school or finish just high school, not very good high school, have few options to make a good living.
In other words, workers without college degrees in the US do tend to have fewer well-paying options than, say, in Germany, where the labor market is more regulated. That's made manufacturing jobs more valuable. Studies have meanwhile found that the wage premium once enjoyed by manufacturing, that is the additional pay a production job receives over a non-production job, has steadily declined in the US, while other non-production jobs are doing much better.
Now, again, that may lead to inequality. That may make people unhappy. The politicians may want to do something about that. But the idea that there's only good jobs in manufacturing is really only relevant for a small portion of society. And even that tends to be exaggerated.
Still, the fears over industry's future are visible in Germany, like in this poster for the Alternative for Germany, or AfD.
Like other populist parties surging around the world, the AfD bucks the tradition of older parties by going after sweeping changes. For example, by ending the relationship with the European Union, a measure that, from a trade standpoint alone, would be a massive change for Germany.
For economists like Posen, the obsession with traditional manufacturing jobs is akin to chasing the past.
What is clear is that the resonance of this idea that there is this sort of golden era of manufacturing and that it creates communities that other forms of economics don't have is very resonant with people across a broad range of societies. I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong ethically and in economic fact. I mean, I think it's sort of running uphill against the fact that in most of our societies, the vast majority of people work in services, and even those people who are labeled as working in manufacturing, many of them work in glass office buildings in Frankfurt or München or Berlin, and not in an actual factory in a small city. So it is kind of weird, but it does resonate.
But with globalization seemingly on the retreat, is the rule of deindustrialization still so ironclad? Back to SKW Piesteritz, our fertilizer plant in the city of Wittenberg. An example of traditional German industry looking for its place in a new landscape. Looming over its future, the country's decarbonization plans. Competition from outside, and of course, a dependence on natural gas, in this case, the key feeder material, accounting for some 80% of the company's cost. Carsten Franzke is a managing director at SKW Piesteritz. He portrays his company's fate as tied to that of German industry collectively.
Eine, ich sag mal, wettbewerbsfähige und vor allem umweltfreundliche Produktionsbasis zu bekommen. Das ist eine Aufgabe der nächsten, ich sag mal wirklich Jahrzehnte. So. Und wenn ich es nicht schaffe, diese Zeit des Übergangs in diese Transformation mit einer Brückentechnologie so unterstütze, dass mir die Industrie, wir reden nicht von SKW, wir reden von der Industrie, die Industrie hier halte über diesen Zeitraum dieser Transformation, dann werde ich die Industrie verlieren, ich werde in eine Deindustrialisierung stürzen.
His company makes a fertilizer pellet containing urea, a chemical that transports nitrogen to crops. It employs just under 900 people. Earlier this year, plant managers stopped one of its 2 production lines after deeming it no longer cost-effective. As we filmed, it was running at 80% capacity. Production here survived German reunification, a time when many factories collapsed. But Franzke says things are now in critical condition. He blames a special government levy to offset the cost of storing more natural gas, an indirect consequence of the Ukraine war.
Und diese 40 Millionen Euro, wenn ich die nicht hätte, trotz aller Gaspreise, trotz aller Strompreise internationaler Art, diese 40 Millionen, wenn ich davon entlastet werden würde, hätte ich jetzt die Luft zum Atmen.
The good news for Franzke is that the new government plans to scrap that surcharge, but his challenges aren't going away, especially decarbonization.
Viele Vorstellungen gehen irgendwo nicht so weit, dass man der Industrie zutraut, die Umweltauflagen zu erfüllen. Und man will das Thema lösen, indem man sagt, okay, Industrie, wir holen uns das aus dem Ausland, die energieintensive Industrie, lösen das Personalproblem, lösen das Energiepreisproblem, lösen den Wasserstoffhochlauf. Aber was wir nicht lösen, ist die Abhängigkeit. Ich begebe mich mit diesem Weg in eine Abhängigkeit, die ganz gefährlich ist. Und das können wir nicht zulassen.
You could argue that this kind of energy-intensive industry has become outdated, a business model based on unrealistically cheap energy. Now that reality has caught up, the sector is paying the price. And that maybe it would be better if it gave way for cheaper production elsewhere. But SKW has another argument, that it's system relevant for Germany. It emphasizes that its biggest competitors are cheaper Russian suppliers.
Also was ich nicht im eigenen Sinne autark produziere, und das ist bei den Grundnahrungsmitteln, bei der Verteidigung und so weiter ganz wichtig, da bin ich von Dritten abhängig. Und das zu erklären, die Zusammenhänge, warum das so ist, das ist das, wo wir uns auch, ich sag mal, eine Verantwortung gefühlt haben und auch kämpfen.
Germany's chemical industry also has leverage. It accounts for almost 340,000 direct jobs in the country. And as in SKW's hometown of Wittenberg, many are very protective of those jobs.
In einer Stadt, die knapp 50.000 Einwohner hat, können Sie sich vorstellen, welchen Stellenwert das einnimmt. Also A als Arbeitgeber und dann natürlich auch als Steuerzahler. Das ist einer der größten Steuerzahler, und seitdem jetzt wir die Situation haben, dass SKW keine fairen Wettbewerbsbedingungen erreichen kann, ist es so, dass wir natürlich als Stadt große Probleme haben.
Thorsten Zugehör is mayor of Wittenberg. He believes that SKW will thrive in a better business environment, but he acknowledges there's a limit to what the government can do.
Der Staat kann nur dafür sorgen, dass es faire Wettbewerbsbedingungen gibt. Er kann nicht im Vergleich zu China den Staat, da kann der Staat nicht die wirtschaftlichen Bedingungen, so wie es dort vielleicht ist, absolut dominieren und dirigieren. Wissen Sie, ich bin in der DDR groß geworden. Wir kennen das, wie das mit den Volkswirtschaften läuft.
With so many jobs at stake, is that line between improving the business environment and interfering in the market now getting thinner? The last German government notably refused to intervene several times last year. It rejected help for 2 flying taxi companies struggling to secure investment. It also refused to help out domestic solar cell producers who couldn't compete with cheaper producers in Asia, and especially China, and begged for state help, but to no avail.
That industry also called itself system relevant for the climate transition.
But those were small peanuts. What about the big industries? The previous German government snapped to attention when Volkswagen began to struggle last year.
Denn Deutschland muss Autoland bleiben, das ist unser größtes Unternehmen.
Germany's car industry employs almost 800,000 workers directly. And this is where the new government will have to make its mark. To what extent will it shape German industry moving ahead? Even before taking office, the new coalition sought to send a reassuring message to industry.
Die künftige Regierung, die künftige Koalition wird reformieren und investieren, um Deutschland stabil zu halten, sicherer zu machen und wirtschaftlich wieder stärker zu machen.
The new coalition agreement envisions support for several industries hit hard in recent years, such as the car industry, through new tax measures, and carbon-heavy industries like SKW by reducing energy prices, scrapping that gas levy, and supporting carbon capture projects. Some of those promises are more concrete than others. Each will face opposition, cost money, and could even run afoul of Germany's climate plans. But there are also future industries to keep in mind, like AI and robotics.
Is Germany investing enough in the future?
Manfred Knopf is the former head of Commerzbank, Germany's second largest lender.
And so now we are organizing money. The question is it now devoted into the right topics, into the right projects?
But it isn't just the public sector that has to invest more, it's also the private sector. And in Germany in particular, it's fallen behind in recent years.
While German universities and institutes have traditionally played a significant role in areas like AI and quantum computing, companies in those areas have struggled to secure much-needed funding, and looked elsewhere for that capital, like the US.
Raising that money from the EU is a structural weakness of the bloc, which is essentially fractured into 27 different capital markets. That makes raising investment across borders very difficult.
That's why I'm advocating for years for the next phase of a European harmonization of the capital markets union, because only a deep European capital market will attract this capital and place in this competitiveness between the US and China. So it's absolutely fundamental that now this becomes a top priority of the EU Commission, backed by all member states of the EU, to make progress here.
So where does this go from here? Well, German industry is indeed in a precarious moment, and some industries in particular are more threatened than others. German spending will attempt to stave off the worst, but a larger trend is clear.
If you believe economists, then the overall German industrial base is likely to continue shrinking in the years ahead, as is the case with most advanced economies.
Germany will strive to become more competitive in advanced tech, but could use help on a European level to raise the capital. Finally, Germany is perhaps better positioned to avoid the pain from deindustrialization now visible in the US, but the moment isn't without its risks.
That's all for this episode of Business Beyond. Be sure to check out our other episodes that we have for you, and keep an eye on us in the weeks ahead for even more content. In the meantime, thanks for watching.